Jasmine Williams pushed through the revolving doors of the downtown Atlanta Medical Building, her arms loaded with grocery bags. At 24, she was exhausted from pulling a double shift at the diner where she worked, but she still needed to pick up her grandmother's medication from the pharmacy on the third floor. The elderly pharmacist, Mr. Chen, always stayed late on Thursdays just for customers like her grandmother who couldn't get there during regular hours. She headed straight for the elevator, jabbing the button with her elbow since her hands were full. The doors slid open, and she stepped inside, pressing the button for the third floor. But before the doors could close, she heard a voice. "Hold the elevator, please." Jasmine stuck her foot out to stop the doors, and a man in a wheelchair rolled into view. He was Korean, probably in his late 30s, with sharp, handsome features and an expensive-looking suit that seemed out of place in this modest medical building. Two other men in dark suits flanked him, but they stopped at the elevator threshold. "We'll take the stairs, boss," one of them said in Korean accented English. "Meet you up there." The man in the wheelchair nodded, and Jasmine noticed something flash across his face, annoyance maybe, or embarrassment. He wheeled himself into the elevator with practiced efficiency, positioning his chair at an angle that gave them both room. "Thank you," he said to Jasmine, his accent subtle but present. "Which floor?" "Third," she replied, noting that he'd already pressed the button for the same floor. The elevator lurched into motion, climbing slowly. They rode in silence for a few seconds before the elevator suddenly groaned, shuddered, and came to a complete stop. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out entirely, leaving them in darkness broken only by the dim emergency lighting. "You've got to be kidding me," Jasmine muttered, pressing the alarm button. Nothing happened. She tried the button for the lobby. Still nothing. "Great, we're stuck." She heard the man in the wheelchair shift, and when he spoke, his voice was remarkably calm. "The building is old. This probably happens often." "Yeah, but I needed to pick up my grandmother's heart medication before the pharmacy closes." Jasmine checked her phone. No signal. Of course, she was about to panic when she noticed something odd about the man beside her. His jaw was clenched tight, and even in the dim light, she could see a sheen of sweat on his forehead. His hands gripped the armrests of his wheelchair with white-knuckled intensity. "Hey, are you okay?" she asked, concern overriding her own frustration. "I'm fine," he said tersely, but his breathing had become shallow and rapid. Jasmine had seen enough panic attacks during her time volunteering at the community center to recognize the signs. "You're not fine, you're having a panic attack." She set down her grocery bags and knelt beside his wheelchair. "Look at me. What's your name?" "Dae-jung," he managed between gasps. "My name is Dae-jung Park." "Okay, Dae-jung. I'm Jasmine. Listen to my voice and breathe with me, okay? In through your nose, hold for 4 seconds, out through your mouth." She demonstrated, breathing slowly and deliberately. Dae-jung tried to follow her rhythm, but his chest was heaving, his eyes wild with fear. Jasmine had never seen someone so terrified of being in an elevator, but she didn't judge. Everyone had their demons. "Tell me something," she said, trying to distract him. "What brings you here so late?" "Physical therapy," he gasped. "Third floor, every Thursday." "Me too. Well, not therapy, but I come every Thursday for my grandmother's medication." "Funny we've never run into each other before." She kept talking, her voice steady and soothing, telling him about her grandmother, about the diner, about anything she could think of to keep his mind off the enclosed space. Slowly, gradually, his breathing began to even out. The panic in his eyes receded, replaced by something like gratitude. They sat there in the darkness, Jasmine continuing to talk, Dae-jung listening and breathing, until finally, after what felt like an eternity but was probably only 15 minutes, the elevator shuddered back to life and resumed its climb. When the doors opened on the third floor, Dae-jung's two associates were there, their faces masks of barely controlled alarm. "Boss, are you—" one of them started, but Dae-jung raised a hand to silence him. "I'm fine, Sung-ho, thanks to this young woman." He turned to Jasmine, and she saw genuine warmth in his dark eyes. "Thank you, Jasmine. You didn't have to help me, but you did." "Of course I did," Jasmine said, picking up her grocery bags. "That's what people do. They help each other." She hurried off to the pharmacy, leaving Daejung staring after her with an expression his associates had never seen on their boss's face before. Wonder. Jasmine made it to Mr. Chen's pharmacy just before he closed, got her grandmother's medication, and headed home on the bus. She'd already forgotten about the man in the elevator, her mind occupied with worries about rent, about whether she'd get enough shifts next week to cover her bills, about her grandmother's declining health. When she finally got home to the small apartment she shared with her grandmother in the West End, it was nearly 10 o'clock. Her grandmother, Dorothy, was asleep in her recliner, the TV playing softly. Jasmine gently woke her, helped her take her medication, and got her settled into bed. It was only after she'd showered and changed into her pajamas that Jasmine finally allowed herself to collapse onto her own bed. She was just drifting off to sleep when her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, local but not one she recognized. "Hello," she answered groggily. "Miss Williams, Jasmine Williams." The voice was male, professional, with a slight accent. "Yeah, who's this? My name is Sung-Ho Kim. I work for someone you helped earlier this evening. Mr. Park would like to speak with you if you have a moment." Jasmine sat up, suddenly wide awake. "The guy from the elevator. How did you get my number?" There was a pause, and she could almost hear the man choosing his words carefully. "Mr. Park has resources. He wanted to properly thank you for your kindness tonight. Would you be willing to meet him for lunch tomorrow?" His treat, of course. Every instinct Jasmine had was screaming that this was weird. Normal people didn't track down strangers who helped them in an elevator. Normal people didn't have associates who could find unlisted phone numbers within an hour. "I don't think so," she said carefully. "It was nice to help, but it wasn't a big deal. He doesn't owe me anything." "Miss Williams," Sung-Ho's voice dropped lower, "I understand your hesitation, but you should know that Mr. Park doesn't often meet with people outside his immediate circle. The fact that he's asking to see you is significant. He simply wants to thank you properly, and perhaps offer his assistance with something." "Assistance with what?" "That would be between you and Mr. Park. But I can tell you this, he noticed you were picking up medication for your grandmother. He has connections in the medical community. If your grandmother needs care that she can't afford." Jasmine's breath caught. How could he possibly know that? Unless this Daejung Park was someone far more powerful and connected than she'd realized. "Who is he?" she asked quietly. "Who is Daejung Park really?" Another pause. "That's also something you should discuss with him directly." The lunch would be in a public place, Petro's Mediterranean in Buckhead, noon tomorrow. "Mr. Park asks nothing of you except an hour of your time. After that, if you never want to hear from us again, you won't." Jasmine knew she should say no, but the mention of help for her grandmother's medical care was too tempting to ignore. Dorothy needed specialists they couldn't afford, treatments their insurance wouldn't cover. If this mysterious man could actually help. "Okay," she finally said. "Noon tomorrow, but I'm bringing a friend and I'm telling people where I'll be." Of course, Mr. Park would expect nothing less. "Thank you, Miss Williams." After he hung up, Jasmine sat staring at her phone for a long moment. What had she just agreed to? Petro's Mediterranean was the kind of upscale restaurant Jasmine had only ever passed by, never imagining she'd eat there. The hostess seemed to expect her, immediately leading her and her best friend, Keisha, to a private corner booth where Daejung Park waited, his wheelchair positioned at the head of the table. He looked different in daylight, Jasmine thought. Still handsome, still expensive looking, but there was something else, an air of authority that seemed to command the attention of everyone in the restaurant, even though he was sitting down. "Miss Williams," he greeted her with a slight bow of his head. "Thank you for coming. And you brought a friend. Smart. This is Keisha," Jasmine said, sliding into the booth. "I hope that's okay." "Of course, any friend of yours is welcome." Daejung gestured to the menus. "Please order anything you like. The lamb is excellent here." They made small talk while looking over the menus, and Jasmine found herself relaxing slightly. Daejung was charming and attentive, asking about her work at the diner, her grandmother's health, her life. He seemed genuinely interested, not just making conversation. But Keisha was less trusting. "So, Mr. Park," she said bluntly after they'd ordered, "why are we really here? Jazz helps people all the time. She's never been taken to fancy lunches for it before." Daejung smiled, and there was respect in his eyes. Direct. "I appreciate that. You're right to be suspicious. He turned his attention to Jasmine. Last night you helped me when I was vulnerable. You saw me at my worst, trapped, afraid, having a panic attack like a child, and you didn't judge, you just helped. Do you know how rare that is? Not that rare, Jasmine said. Most people are decent if you give them the chance. Most people see the wheelchair first, and the man second. They either pity me or they underestimate me. You did neither. You saw someone who needed help, and you helped. That tells me something about your character. Okay, but that still doesn't explain why we're here, Keisha interjected. Dae-jung leaned back in his wheelchair, studying them both. I want to be honest with you, because I think you deserve honesty. My name is Dae-jung Park, and I am the head of a Korean-American business organization. We deal in imports, exports, real estate, and various other ventures. The way he said business organization made Jasmine's stomach drop. She'd seen enough movies to know what that meant. You're talking about organized crime, she said quietly. I'm talking about survival in a world that doesn't always play by the rules, Dae-jung corrected. Yes, some of what my organization does exists in legal gray areas, but we also provide protection for Korean businesses that the police ignore. We help immigrants who have nowhere else to turn. We offer opportunities to people the system has failed. That's a fancy way of saying you're in the mafia, Keisha said flatly. Dae-jung didn't deny it. Call it what you will. The point is, I'm offering you something, Jasmine. Your grandmother needs medical care you can't afford. I can arrange for her to see the best specialists, to receive the best treatment, all expenses covered, no strings attached. Jasmine's heart hammered in her chest. It was everything she'd been desperately hoping for, everything Dorothy needed, but nothing in life was free. What's the catch? She asked. No catch. Considerate payment for a debt. You helped me, I help your grandmother. That's all. I don't believe you, Jasmine said, surprising herself with her boldness. Nobody does something like this without expecting something in return. What do you really want? Dae-jung was quiet for a moment, and something unreadable passed across his face. What I really want, he said slowly, is to prove that I'm not just the monster people think I am. What I really want is for one good person in this city to see me as someone capable of kindness. What I really want is for you to accept my help, and let that be enough. That night, Jasmine lay awake in bed, her mind churning. Keisha had left her with a dire warning. Girl, you cannot get involved with the mob. I don't care how nice he seems or how much he wants to help Grandma Dorothy. These people are dangerous. But Jasmine couldn't stop thinking about the look in Dae-jung's eyes when he talked about being seen as more than a monster. She couldn't stop thinking about the terror on his face in that elevator, how vulnerable he'd been, how human. She also couldn't stop thinking about her grandmother. Dorothy had worked 3 jobs to raise Jasmine after her parents died. She'd sacrificed everything to make sure Jasmine had opportunities she never had. Now Dorothy was sick, her heart failing, and Jasmine was helpless to save her. The next morning, Jasmine's phone rang again. This time she wasn't surprised to see an unfamiliar number. Miss Williams, this is Dr. Sarah Cho, from Emory Heart Center, a woman's voice said. I understand your grandmother, Dorothy Williams, has been experiencing heart problems. I'd like to schedule her for a full evaluation next week. There's no cost to you or your grandmother. Who set this up? Jasmine asked, though she already knew the answer. A generous benefactor has agreed to cover all costs related to your grandmother's care. All you need to do is bring her in. Can I schedule you for Monday morning? Jasmine closed her eyes. He'd already done it, without waiting for her answer, without asking permission. Dae-jung had arranged for her grandmother to see one of the best cardiologists in the city. She should be angry. She should refuse. But all she could think about was Dorothy getting the help she needed. Monday morning, Jasmine agreed quietly. We'll be there. After she hung up, Jasmine received a text from another unfamiliar number. Your grandmother deserves the best care. No strings, no debt, just let her be healthy. DP. Jasmine found herself crying, overwhelmed by a mixture of gratitude, confusion, and fear. She'd stumbled into something far bigger than herself, and she had no idea where it would lead. Over the next few weeks, Jasmine found herself drawn into Dae-jung's orbit in ways she never expected. It started with updates about her grandmother's treatment. Dae-jung would text occasionally to ask how Dorothy was doing, If there was anything else she needed, then it became more personal. He'd send her pictures of things that reminded him of their conversation: a sunset over the city, a particularly good-looking plate of food, a book he thought she might enjoy. Jasmine found herself responding, and before long they were texting regularly. She learned that Dae-jung had been paralyzed 5 years ago in a car accident that killed his wife. He'd been driving. The guilt and the loss had nearly destroyed him, but he'd pulled himself together for the sake of his organization and the people who depended on him. The claustrophobia and panic attacks were remnants of being trapped in the wreckage for hours before rescue arrived. The elevator incident had triggered memories he usually kept locked away. Jasmine told him about her parents dying in a house fire when she was 10, about being raised by her grandmother, about her dreams of going to nursing school that she'd put on hold to work and take care of Dorothy. They were, she realized, two people carrying enormous grief, finding unexpected understanding in each other. One evening, Dae-jung invited her to dinner at his home, a stunning penthouse in Midtown with views of the entire city. Jasmine was nervous, but Keisha had reluctantly agreed that if Dae-jung wanted to hurt her, he'd had plenty of opportunities already. The penthouse was both intimidating and beautiful, filled with art and elegant furniture, but also surprisingly warm. Dae-jung had cooked dinner himself, Korean food he'd learned to make from his late mother. "I'm impressed," Jasmine said, tasting the bulgogi. "This is amazing. Cooking is one of the few things I can do that makes me feel normal," Dae-jung admitted. "In the kitchen, I'm not a crime boss or a man in a wheelchair. I'm just someone making food." They talked for hours that night, about everything and nothing. Jasmine felt herself falling for this complicated, dangerous, unexpectedly tender man, and it terrified her. "I shouldn't be here," she said suddenly, setting down her fork. "This is crazy. You're a criminal. I'm a waitress who volunteers at a community center. We're from completely different worlds. Are we?" Dae-jung wheeled closer to her. "Or are we just two people who understand what it's like to lose everything and have to rebuild? Two people who know that the world isn't black and white, but shades of gray? That's a very pretty way to justify a life of crime." "I'm not trying to justify anything. I know what I am, Jasmine. I know the things I've done, the choices I've made, but I also know that you make me want to be better. You make me remember that there's more to life than power and revenge and survival." Jasmine's resolve wavered. "My grandmother is getting better because of you. The doctors say she could have years left now, years she wouldn't have had without the treatment you provided. I'm glad. She seems like a remarkable woman who raised a remarkable granddaughter. But what happens now? What happens when people in your world find out you're spending time with me? When your enemies decide I'm a weakness they can exploit?" Dae-jung's expression darkened. "That won't happen. I have the best security in the city. Anyone who even thought about harming you would have to go through me first, and I promise you that's not something anyone wants to do." "That's exactly what I'm talking about." Jasmine stood up, frustrated. "Violence, threats, that's your solution to everything. It's the only solution that works in my world. Then maybe I don't belong in your world." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Dae-jung looked at her with such raw emotion that Jasmine's breath caught. "No," he said quietly, "you don't belong in my world. You belong in a better one, but that doesn't change the fact that I—" He stopped himself, shaking his head. "You should go. I'll have Sung-ho drive you home." 2 weeks passed with no contact from Dae-jung. Jasmine threw herself into work and taking care of her grandmother, trying to convince herself that the silence was for the best. They'd both recognized that their connection, however real it felt, was impossible, but she couldn't stop thinking about him, about the loneliness in his eyes, the way he'd looked at her like she was something precious and rare, the vulnerability he'd shown her that he showed no one else. Then, one night, Sung-ho appeared at the diner where Jasmine was working the late shift. "Miss Williams," he said urgently, "you need to come with me." "What's wrong? Is Dae-jung okay?" "He's alive, but there was an incident. A rival organization attacked one of our businesses. Mr. Park was injured. He's refusing treatment until he speaks with you." Jasmine's heart stopped. "Take me to him, now." Sung-ho drove her to a private medical facility on the outskirts of the city, clearly a place where Dae-jung's organization could receive treatment without questions. She was led to a room where Dae-jung lay in bed, his face bruised and a bandage wrapped around his ribs. A doctor was arguing with him. Mr. Park, you have broken ribs. You need to stay still and let us get out, Dae-jung said when he saw Jasmine. Everyone out. Now the doctor and Sung-ho left reluctantly, closing the door behind them. Jasmine rushed to Dae-jung's bedside. What happened? Are you okay? I'm fine. It looks worse than it is. He reached for her hand and she let him take it. I'm sorry. I promised you'd be safe, that staying away from me would keep you out of danger, but I realize now that was a lie I told myself. What do you mean? I mean that even when we're not together, I think about you constantly. You've become important to me, Jasmine, more important than anything has been in years, and that makes you a target, whether we're together or not. Jasmine squeezed his hand. Then what do? We have a choice. You can walk away, go back to your life, and I'll make sure you're protected from a distance. Or, he paused, his dark eyes intense, or you can stay, not in my world, but beside it. Let me be part of your life, and you be part of mine. Let me help you go to nursing school. Let me be there for your grandmother. Let me try to be the man you make me want to be. And the danger will always be there. I can't promise you safety. All I can promise is that I'll do everything in my power to protect you, and that being with you is worth any risk. Jasmine looked at this complicated, dangerous, broken man who'd somehow found his way into her heart. She thought about the kindness he'd shown her grandmother, the vulnerability he'd shared, the way he'd treated her not as someone beneath him, but as an equal worthy of his respect. She thought about her grandmother's advice. Life is too short to waste on fear, baby. If you find something real, something that makes you feel alive, you hold on to it with both hands. I must be crazy, Jasmine said, but I'm staying, not because of the money, or the help, or any of that. I'm staying because when I'm with you, I see someone worth believing in, someone who's more than what the world says he is. Dae-jung pulled her down gently and kissed her forehead. I don't deserve you. Probably not, Jasmine agreed with a small smile, but you're stuck with me anyway. Over the following months, they built something unexpected, a relationship that existed in the space between two worlds. Jasmine continued working at the diner while attending nursing school, which Dae-jung insisted on funding. Her grandmother's health improved dramatically, and Dorothy, after initial concerns, came to care deeply for the nice young man in the wheelchair who treated her granddaughter like a queen. Dae-jung, for his part, found himself changing in ways he never expected. Having Jasmine in his life made him reconsider some of his business decisions, pushed him toward more legitimate ventures, made him want to build something that wouldn't embarrass her or put her at risk. It wasn't a fairy tale. There were still dangers, still complications, still moments when Jasmine questioned whether she'd made the right choice. But when Dae-jung looked at her with those dark eyes full of wonder, like she was the most miraculous thing he'd ever encountered, she knew that some connections transcended logic and reason. She'd helped a stranger in an elevator, never knowing that simple act of kindness would change both their lives forever. And an hour later, when the call came, she'd made a choice that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Sometimes, Jasmine thought, the bravest thing you can do is say yes to the unknown, to take someone's hand and step forward together into whatever comes next. That was the choice she made, and she never looked back.